talk a lot about audio on this show. I've done a number of tutorials myself on how to use Wirecast or how to improve the audio on your show. And actually, just a few weeks ago, last month, actually in July, we did a part 1 of this series on creating great live audio for your broadcasts. I'm very pleased to have back on the show for part 2, a continuation of our previous discussion, Mike Russell, and he'll be coming on the show, and we're talking about things we didn't get to in the last episode on this topic. So I'm very excited to have him back. He's just back from holiday. This is going to be a fun live show. We're going to get into some advanced techniques, some really interesting things you can do to clean up and improve the audio on your live broadcasts. So stick around. You're watching Wirecast Live. Welcome. Buckle your seatbelts. I'll be right back after these opening credits. Welcome back to another episode of Wirecast Live. I'm your host, Andrew Haley, and each week we are live here on Facebook, YouTube, and occasionally Twitter and Periscope on at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time here in California. And we're coming at you live from the studios here at Telestream, where we do a lot of our video recording and our live shows. And the goal of this show, if you've not viewed it before, or if you're watching this on demand, you can always catch the live shows on our channels. But the goal of this show is to teach you something that you didn't know about live broadcasting or live streaming. It's also a place to provide a community of other viewers like yourself who are either Wirecast users or just interested in the topics that we cover around live video and live broadcasting. That's what we do here at Telestream and with Wirecast. So there's a lot to cover. You know, obviously Wirecast sits in the middle of a broadcasting ecosystem, everything from audio, which we'll be covering on today's show, to video techniques, lighting, production, business, marketing, even just hobbyists, music, photography. We've talked about drones. We'll have some more shows on that topic coming up later in the year. So this is the place to find out. If you want to get notified of what our upcoming shows are or what the titles are, you want to get subscribed, head over to our email list. You can sign up at telestream.net/WirecastLive. That will get you on our subscription list. We will send you an upcoming email about shows and topics and guests that we're going to be covering here. And so it should be fun. Next week, actually, we have a very advanced Wirecast user named Larry Fitzgerald, who does a number of sports broadcasts. And Jeffrey Fitzgerald, not Larry Fitzgerald, I'm sorry. Jeffrey Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald's the receiver on the Arizona Cardinals that I'm thinking of, but also sports related. And Jeffrey and I will be talking about live sports production on next week's show. So you should definitely catch that if you're interested in sports production or creating your own sports news talk show for social media. He is an expert at it. He's done some really good stuff, so I can't wait to dive into that. And then if you are using Wirecast or using it to stream out your own shows, either just getting your feet wet or you're a seasoned veteran with lots of shows under your belt, please share them with us on Facebook or social media or Twitter, and use the hashtag #WhereIsWirecast. We would love to know. Use this hashtag right here, #WhereIsWirecast, so we can find out where you're using Wirecast and what streams are going on with it. And this week's stream of the week, I'm pulling up here on my desktop, but this was shared to us from one of the users on the Facebook group. And this is their, it looks like a weekly service at their church. And it is an awesome live stream. I have to say, this is a pretty impressive presentation and production. And I think they were using Wirecast to do it. And this was shared out, and the whole setup to do it was shared out in the Wirecast Facebook users group, which is a great place you can find other users of the software. You can share questions, tips, techniques, learn about setups and things like that. So I'm actually going to just scroll down. You can find this setup and the link to the stream right here. Meisterpie. So thanks for sharing that. This is a cool setup. It was really exciting to see that. That is a pretty pro production that you've got going on there. So that's our stream of the week from Meisterpie. Congratulations. If you want to be featured on the stream of the week, please share your live streams or your setups either in the Facebook users group. We can find them there, or again, just use that hashtag #WhereIsWirecast. Okay, without further ado, I would like to bring on our guest for the week, and then we are going to continue our conversation from our last episode on this topic, producing great live audio. And there's very few people who know better than this man how to produce amazing audio for live broadcasts. He's an expert. He does it for his business. He's the creative director of Music Radio Creative, and he's based out off the Isle of Wight in the United Kingdom, and he's joining us live via our Skype connection. Mike Russell, are you there?
I'm here from the Isle of Wight. Yes, that's right. It's great to be here, Andrew. Thank you for having me back.
Yes. Now, the Isle of Wight, there are other isles out there. Is there the Isle of Man and the other isles in the vicinity?
That's it, the Isle of Man, which is the one that the Isle of Wight always gets confused with. That's the one between Scotland and Ireland, the piece of mud, I think, that a giant once threw into the middle of the sea there. Then there's the Isles of Scilly, just off Cornwall. There's the Shetland Islands up towards northern Scotland. And we were discussing it a couple of days ago, actually, the Outer Hebrides, that I think would take me about 16 and a half hours to drive to if I left now.
That sounds like a bit of a long haul there, especially if you're island hopping. Now,
Yes.
you're all these isles are oriented around the Big Isle, the British Isle, right? So, how far off the mainland is the Isle of Wight?
So it's not too far. You can get on a fast ferry that will take you there as a foot passenger in 10 minutes. But if you've got a car, you want to get on the car ferry, it's going to take you 40 minutes to an hour. So you have to kind of time it accordingly. But it's quite nice over here because you get that kind of old England feel. There's lots of green grass and little villages and town fairs and things like that.
Sounds
so
amazing.
it's a great place to come and visit.
How many inhabitants are on the island with you?
There's actually 150,000. So
Wow.
for a small, tiny island, there's quite a big population, but it's all spread out. So it's all over different parts of the island. I'm on the east part of the island, which is more populated. But if you go to the west, you're lucky if you see another sheep or another cow. So yeah.
Interesting. Wow, I've got to get out there. That sounds lovely, absolutely lovely. And do you get the fog and all of the sort of weather sort of considerations that the rest of sort of the England's relatively well known and even a bit
Yes.
lampooned about?
We do. We store umbrellas away. Although a positive thing about the Isle of Wight is it is supposed to be the sunniest place in the UK. So that's why everyone, certainly the summer we've had with this heat wave over here in Europe, a lot of people have been staycationing, staying at home, which means that they've been hopping on that ferry to the Isle of Wight, which has been nice. Ian Anderson Gray, who's in the chat, actually came over to the Isle of Wight and visited. So
Ian's
it was
watching.
nice.
Welcome, Ian.
Yeah.
Yes, so another UK fellow. So and also a friend of yours from
Yes.
how far back do you and Ian go, by the way?
Many years back. My goodness me, I think we're going back to 2014, 2015. So Ian actually spoke for us at a conference we put on, and we've been friends ever since. So yeah.
Cool. Well, he's a great guy. And Ian, thanks for watching. And for the rest of you, if you have a question or comment for Mike throughout the show, please, or myself, leave it in the chat. Or folks like Ian can obviously jump on it. They know plenty about Wirecast and all the things that go into live broadcasts. But I want to just briefly mention that we already had a sort of a part one of this conversation in our July 12th episode. And we covered a lot. We did a really big deep dive into sort of loudness, measuring loudness versus a sort of overall volume, right? And there's a difference between the two. And you did a great demo on kind of how it works and how you can add certain tools inside of some of the Adobe products to both measure that or visualize the way that audio can get represented, help you clean it up and add filters and things like that. So if you guys are curious, head back to that episode and you can see kind of a primer on how we got onto this topic and what we've already covered so far. And then today, I think we want to sort of pick up a little bit where we left off and dive into more of the cleaning up of audio and the compression, how to remove background noise, and get into the kind of the nitty-gritty of improving the sound of one's voice on the sort of live broadcast. And I'm noticing you're running some effects right now on that microphone right in front of you. Is that right, Mike?
You noticed, yeah. So I wish I could actually grab the camera and show you, but I've just put a new bit of kit in my chain, and I was thinking actually this might be a really good place to start. Some of the audio hardware that you can get into your chain before you even get to the post-processing, especially in the case where you're doing a live show like obviously we're doing right now, and I know a lot of people watching and using obviously Wirecast will be looking to do it live and not necessarily post-process afterwards. So that's where I think audio equipment comes into its own. I've always been an advocate of having some kind of a mixing board so you can control your inputs and outputs. And obviously, when I do some demos later on in Adobe Audition, I'll have different faders open to be able to play different audio sources. But something I've just recently put into my chain is a product from DBX. Now, I've had for years and years and years the DBX 286S, which for anyone who doesn't know, it's a microphone preamp and processor. And I've used that to record my podcasts. So what it does is it takes your microphone signal and it takes it halfway through before it hits your audio interface or your computer, and it adds some effects to it. So it'll add a little bit of compression to make the voice a little chunkier, so it's not got so much dynamic range. It's not going so quiet and so loud, but it's leveling it out. It's also noise gating it, and it's adding a bit of EQ. So I've had that for a while, but just recently I've added into my live streaming chain the DBX 166XS, and this thing I have put in as the final little thing that goes between my overall output and my audio interface. So it's sitting there as a compressor. It's basically a dual channel compressor, and you can use it in a couple of different ways. You can use it either with channel 1 and channel 2 as separate inputs. So if you were doing a co-hosted live show, you could have microphone 1 in channel 1 and microphone 2 in channel 2. For my purpose, I'm actually putting the stereo output of my mixing board into the DBX 166XS, and then I'm feeding that to my audio interface, and then from there that audio is going to you on this live stream. And all I've got here is a very lightly set expander gate, which when I go silent will remove my room noise. It'll just cut out any background noise. And then I've got a compressor set up as well, just to level out my voice a little bit and make it sound louder. The problem I found, Andrew, as a live streamer that I was having is getting my audio levels correct. Okay, so I was finding I was either too quiet or I was peaking and going too loud. And one thing I got mentioned to me a lot is I would talk, and then I would play an audio clip that I had pre-recorded earlier, and that clip would be really loud and it would overpower. So listeners would have to keep turning the volume up and down on my stream. So the thing that I decided would be good would be to put a compressor in and level out that audio. So essentially what a compressor will do is it will stop audio going too loud, and it will pull up audio that's going too quiet. And I thought, well, why not throw a bit of audio hardware in there? And obviously straight away you picked up on it. So it's doing its job, I guess.
Yeah, everything sounds sort of from you, and listeners, please leave a comment on how you think Mike's audio sounds on this. I think that would be a useful feedback to sort of, and if you have observations or if you have questions about it. But to my ears, and you guys can let me know if this is what it sounds like to you, but to my ears it sounds very consistent. Like it sounds, I want to say loud, but not overwhelming. And the sort of the lows, the quiets in your sort of intonation and your sort of your pace of speaking, it doesn't sound like there's a huge variation between the loudest parts of your speech and the quietest parts of your speech, and it's all sort of nicely, richly, sort of, I don't know, got a rich feel to it, or sound to it in my ears. So if that's sort of what the compressor is doing, if it's bringing it all sort of to this sort of chunk of audio that's just coming at a consistent level, then I think it's doing a great job of it.
Definitely. And I mean, the best thing about it is that you can really drive it pretty well. So I mean, compression it's definitely something that I can talk a little bit more about if you'd like during the show. I can show you in Adobe Audition, I can show you how I would set up a compressor there. The same would apply to setting an audio hardware compressor. And when I set this at a certain threshold, it means I can drive in whatever I want. So if I want to add some EQ to my microphone, which again I can demonstrate during the show, EQing a voice, I can add on highs, I can add on mids, I can add on some bass, and then drive it into the compressor, and the compressor will kind of take care of that for me and make sure that I'm not going too loud or too quiet. So yeah, really cool stuff.
That is cool. So, so talk a little bit. You mentioned this piece of hardware, the DBX 186S. I did a quick search and I'm finding the 286S, the DBX 286S. Yes. Maybe we can jump to my my desktop here, Deborah Lee, and we can look at this. I just pulled up some Google images here. So I'm assuming, is this sort of what you're looking at on near or below your desk?
So if you type 166XS, this is the exact one. I've actually got it. It's just underneath my iMac monitor. And the best thing is the metal on the front of this this unit pretty much exactly matches the metal on the iMac that I'm using. So it's kind of a nice match there. So I have that sitting underneath.
Any of these look familiar?
Oh, here we go. Yeah, 166XS. Yep.
So, so this is a physical hardware compressor and preamp.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And what is the advantage of doing it in this physical hardware as opposed to doing it in Adobe Audition?
So very good question. So of course you can do it in Adobe Audition, and if you're working in post, so if you've created something, say you have finished a live stream and you want to clip out some sections, you say, oh, there was a good bit there, there, and there, and you clip out like these 1-minute sections from your hour-long show to use as clips for social media or something like that, then by all means you can drag in the MP4 to Adobe Audition. You can add some post compression, you can add some EQ, make it sound a bit better than it sounded when it was going out live. But what this is doing, this 166XS, is it's actually doing a lot of that work for me live in real time. And because it isn't a hardware compressor, so it's an actual piece of kit, it's actually taking care of that in real time. So there's no delay or latency. Obviously, you could go into Adobe Audition and you could add some real-time effects, but there's always going to be latency. I'm pretty sure, is it true that Wirecast supports VST or audio units? Is that possible that that could be true on your audio output?
Yeah, I wish it was totally true. There is a sort of a partial answer to that, which is that we do have audio processing inside of Wirecast Pro, and those are based on VST plugins. So the processors and effects that are in there now, and I think there is a compressor, are VST based. However, we've not yet expanded that to allow any VST plugin to be installed and used inside of the application yet. That's something we've discussed for a while now, but I don't have a roadmap date for when and if we'll do that.
Sure, and even with that, you'd still have a slight delay on the real-time processing. But I'm pretty sure ScreenFlow supports audio units. Is that right?
That's a good question. I don't know. I do. That's a great question. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But there are some very rich AU, like I want to say the Apple standard, system compressors, limiters, gates in ScreenFlow.
Yeah. Definitely. So yeah, that's good. So yeah, really the real reason to have something like this is just to do everything live there and then for you, particularly if you're doing a live stream. It's just going to make you sound better. It's going to give you the peace of mind. You don't have to worry if you're shouting or if you're suddenly going really quiet. You're getting that consistent volume. I think really is the key thing. I think for many live streamers who are probably watching this right now, they just want a consistent output and they don't want to have to worry about their levels.
And so let's talk about the workflow here, because when you were on the show last time, we mentioned some other hardware. We talked about your mixer, which was a USB mixer, multi-channel, and it could, we talked about how that could actually interface with Adobe Audition, and then and it could actually feed channels, digital channels, back and forth, both to the mixer and from the mixer as sort of buses or auxiliary outputs and things like that. Do you, in order to feed audio into this DBX compressor, do you do that upstream of your mixer, or do you do it downstream of the mixer?
Yeah, so that's essentially what I'm doing is I'm taking the master output from my mixer and then sending that out to the processor, and then that's going out from the processor into an audio interface that then directly sends the audio out to the stream. So that's the so what I've actually got, as you rightly said, I've got the Soundcraft mixing board here, the MTK12.
That's right.
That is sending the master output to the DBX166XS, and then from that I'm sending the outputs of the 166XS into a Focusrite Sapphire 2i2, which is the final link in the chain, and that's then sending the audio out that you hear. It's probably a long and very complicated way to do it, but in terms of giving the absolute pure output that I'm getting from my mixing board, it gives me a lot of options. Plus, I can do things like, obviously I can send the master output, but if I like, I can swap over and I can say, okay, I want to send one of the aux channels from my mixing board to the Focusrite 2i2 via the 166XS processor. And then I can say, I can mix minus it, so I can say I can only send you my microphone channel and not your output, or things like that. So it gives me a ton of options, and yeah, that's why I do it like that.
No, I think it's fantastic. I think I want to lay it out clearly so people are, know exactly where this fits in the chain. So you're saying your microphone goes into the mixer. Your mixer then, you can manipulate channels and create buses digitally in Adobe Audition. And is there another software you use besides Audition to sort of manage the interface, the mixer, on the computer and manage those mixes?
So for the mixes, really it's Adobe Audition. If I'm working in the multitrack of Adobe Audition, I can assign essentially a fader on the mixing board to a different track inside the multitrack. So I can do as much fine-grained stuff as I want with that. So yeah, really Audition. But I mean, it will work with any digital audio workstation. So whatever you're using, as long as it supports multiple different channels to be assigned, you can assign all the different channels, which is great.
Yeah. Okay. So microphone into the mixer, and then if you want to do any additional provisioning or mixing in a digital audio workspace, basically a software tool that works hand in hand with the Soundcraft mixer. From there, you send the master output via XLR to the processor, the DBX 166S, and then from there, XLR one more time to your capture card, basically, your audio capture card, which is Scarlett Focusrite. And let me pull up a picture of that so people know what that's actually a fairly popular model, not too expensive but good quality, right? And it isolates. It's well shielded. It doesn't pick up a lot of room noise or sort of harmonics.
Yep, it's got a rugged sort of metallic scarlet colored box. And it's pretty durable as well. Like you can throw that in a backpack or in a suitcase and take it with you traveling. So if you want to do mobile streaming, it's really a good solution to throw in there. Definitely. Yeah.
So this is a good last stop. Now, tell me a little bit about where, like, these knobs, right? I mean, this is the part that would throw me. I would be a little confused on what my mixing fader should be set at, what the knobs should be set at on the DBX, and then finally what the knobs should be set at on this. So as you're sort of chaining along these XLR cables from device to device, tell me what should you be setting these twisting and these dials and knobs to?
Okay, that's a really good question. Let me start with compression, and let me actually show you as well at the same time inside Audition, because essentially setting a compressor in Audition, you'll have exactly the same settings as you'd get on the front of the DBX.
Okay,
So what I'll do
I'm going to pull up my screen here.
Oh, brilliant. I'll start recording me talking, and I'll go really quiet like this, and then I'll go really loud like this, so I'll get a nice bit of dynamic range here, and then you can see my audio is recording there. So what you're going to get with compression, and I could do this right now in real time on the DBX, I could turn the different dials, but what I'll do is I'll bring up now one of my favorite compressors in Adobe Audition. It's under Amplitude and Compression Dynamics. This is a relatively new effect that's been introduced, I believe, actually in Adobe Audition CC 2018, and it's just a really simple to use compressor. So this is it. I'm going to go to the default view here. Now this is exactly how the compressor on the front of the DBX 166XS looks. So if you can master how the compression works on this feature, not only can you set it on a DBX, but you can set pretty much any compressor in the world. So whether you're using
reference,
Audition,
I'll pull up the picture of the front of that board. So here we are. We have the set of knobs, and then, as you're saying, Mike, it basically corresponds directly to this plugin panel.
Exactly right. Yeah, that's it. So what you're looking there when you had that image there of the 166XS, you've got kind of different boxes for the different effects. The left side of the 166XS is channel 1 and the right side is channel 2. As I said earlier, that could be microphone 1, microphone 2 if you want to use it as a microphone processor, or it could be left and right if you want to use it as a kind of stereo compressor on your final output.
I see. So we have
stream.
channel 1, and then there's this two box, and then there's which is called the expander gate, and then we have the compressor, which looks like 5 knobs. Finally, the limiter, and then channel 2, and the same set of knobs.
And the coolest thing is, Andrew, in this dynamics effect that I have inside Adobe Audition, it's pretty much identical to the 166XS. So everything, I can actually walk you, if you'd like, I can walk you through this whole effect. And kind of once you understand how this effect works, you'll also pretty much understand how everything works on the front of a compressor like the DBX.
That'd be great.
Great, excellent. And one thing I would mention on the 166XS, there's a button in the middle called Stereo Couple. When you click it in, it goes yellow, and it basically links channel 1 and channel 2 together. So if you're doing stereo compression, you only need to set up one side of the compressor, and then it will compress left and right equally. But if you're adding separate compression for 2 different mics, you might want to pull that out and do separate settings depending on, if you have a different mic technique or whatever to your guest. So let's start off then, rather than going into the compressor first, let's start off with the auto gate, which is also known as the expander gate on the front of the DBX. So again, we've got threshold and we've got attack release on the front of the 166XS. It's just labeled, let me have a look at it. It's just labeled release. Okay. So we'll ignore attack because attack is set really aggressively anyway. So we've got auto gate, threshold -20, release 100 milliseconds. So what's happening here is you are saying that any audio that goes below a certain volume is going to be muted, essentially, is not going to get through the gate.
That's the threshold.
And let me enable this. This is the threshold. So this is the very first dial here and the very first dial on the 166XS. I'm just going to bring up the preview window here, and I'm also going to switch off spectral frequency display so you can just see the waveform for the moment.
Okay.
And then when I add this in, auto gate, and the higher I bring that threshold, so if I bring it to 0 dB and you look at the preview window, you will see that the preview, so this is essentially the result you're going to get when you apply the effect, just showing you a preview here. There is no audio getting through because obviously no audio goes above 0 dB. 0 dB is the top. And then as I start to move this down, if I move this down to -5 dB, a very aggressive setting, you'll see that some audio that goes above -5 dB is now getting through the gate.
Really
so the trick
stuff.
is... Exactly, the really loud stuff. And I'll go down to -10, and you'll see some, but not all of my audio will start getting through.
Mm-hmm.
And the trick is when you're setting up a gate or a noise gate, whatever it is, whether it's on a real-time piece of audio hardware, which I'd always recommend over processing inside a computer, because then it gets down to CPUs and latency and all of that. So if you can, it's worth throwing something like this in your chain. You want to set it just so that when you go quiet, it is working, and then when you start speaking, obviously it opens up and it lets your audio through. So down to about -23, and you'll see most of the audio is getting through. But in this tiny gap here, and I didn't actually pause very much when I was speaking. If I just bring up spectral frequency and zoom in, let's try zooming in. Just going to turn on zoom in mirrored there so you can see. Right, okay, there's not much noise in my room anyway, but if you're eagle-eyed there, down in the bass frequencies, you might just see a slightly reddy purpley line here, but the noise gate has eliminated any noise in between my speech in this preview window, meaning this threshold is set pretty well.
So I'm not sure we're seeing your mouse unless you sort of do that a shake and yeah, there you go.
Oh, yeah.
So is that the
Like
area
that.
you're indicating right there? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, that's the area right there. So just a tiny little bit of a red light. It's very, very difficult to see, though. I might be able to zoom that in, but no, it's very difficult to actually show. I need a noisier studio.
You do. You're sound professional. You did too good of a job. Sorry.
But another thing you can do to also see this in action, and I'm going to try this in the multitrack now. Start up a new multitrack session, arm this track to record here, and I'm going to now in real time add in the let's see here, delay, sorry, not delay, amplitude and compression dynamics, and okay, now you can see my noise gate in action in real time. When I start speaking, it goes green, and when I go quiet, it goes red. Okay, and the idea is to set this so that it's closing when you're not talking, and it's opening when you are talking. And the risk here is if you set it too aggressively, so too high, if the threshold is too high, it's going to clip your words, particularly words that begin with S and H. Let's
Yeah, I
just turn
see
it
it's
up
kind
high.
of jumping back and forth between red and green right there. And that's definitely probably an indication that it's cutting you on. The gate's opening and closing while you're speaking, which isn't a good thing.
Yeah, so it's kind of, you're going to get that kind of sound. It's kind of, yeah, and particularly when you say words like so, you might just get oh like that, which is not a good thing.
Right.
But if you set it just right, I mean, there's a sweet spot depending on how well treated your room is. You can get to a sweet spot where whenever you actually speak, the gate is opening, and then when you take a breath like that, then it won't get through the gate. So yeah, threshold is this is the real one you want to be paying attention to. But of course, you do have attack and release. Attack and release, if you understand it on a noise gate, you'll understand it on a compressor as well. So that has attack and release as well. So attack is how quickly the gate kicks in. So how quickly it takes action on the audio signal. And then release is how slow or how quick it is to then release what it's just done. So if it said, oh, there's audio, I better open up, and then if you have the release really high, like 500 milliseconds, you're going to see there's a slight delay on the gate closing again. Probably 500 milliseconds.
I love the analogy of the gate. It reminds me of those doors, those that you can get. You can get those automatic screen doors, or let's say you're in a restaurant and you have those the doors to the kitchen, and you got waiters walking in and through all the time, and sometimes you need them to close slowly because you can't have them slamming on the next guy walking through, right? Because that's going to send food everywhere. So I definitely really am imagining these doors swinging open, and then the attack is how quickly they kind of auto-sense and swing open, and then the release is just how slowly they decide to kind of close back down again. I think that's a wonderful analogy.
Yeah, it's really cool. I like that. So it's like, yeah, you're right. The attack is how aggressively the waiter is pushing the doors open, and then the release is how how expensive the hinges are on the doors.
Yes,
I guess.
how nice are the hinges? Right, exactly. Okay,
it's cool. And the threshold, I guess, is how high the doors are. So if they're too high or how thick they are. So if they're too strong, then some people can't get through. Some people can.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, if you said, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
We've got almost a full working analogy here. So, and then we've got the hold. The hold. We have to talk about that knob.
Right, yeah, and the hold. So you don't always see this. So obviously it's here on this effect. But you won't see it, for instance, on the 166XS, and it really depends how the hardware or software is set up. But the hold is essentially this yellow light in between. So how long is it holding on yellow, sort of half open, half closed, if you like, before it fully closes? So you can either get a very cut kind of gate, which is like cutting your words halfway through, or you can get one that's kind of fading in and out. So if I turn this up, can you see how it's holding?
Yeah.
When I stop speaking. So you're kind of getting that. It's almost, rather than having like chop edits with a gate, you're getting a kind of slow fade out. So yeah, so that can help with words like s, like that, which are hard because they start off quiet, s, and then they get louder, so, like that. And setting a hold, if you're finding that you're having trouble with sounds like that and the gate is just cutting them out, first of all, do try and get your threshold right. Don't set it too aggressively. But if you're still having problems and you do have the option of a hold knob, and you don't always have this on every gate that you'll come across, just push it up. Don't push it up to 100. Obviously, I did that to demonstrate how it works. Just start pushing this one up ever so slowly and see if that does the job for you.
And do you recommend sort of just as someone dials this in, maybe start with a threshold in the 20s, negative 20s, and kind of if you need to adjust it up or down from there, and then a release and an attack kind of about where you have those, and then just recording some samples and just see how it sounds?
Yeah, absolutely. I think minus 20, providing your levels are all good going into your audio interface or through your mixing board, I think minus 20 is always a really good starting point.
Okay.
I mean, as you can see here, when I'm talking, it's green, and when I'm not, it's red. So minus 20 for my levels, I'm trying to hit up nearly 0 dB, so I'm quite loud anyway. That's a good place to start. That's if you're working with live audio. And particularly, I mean, if you're working with like a hardware piece of audio equipment like the DBX, you can actually plug in headphones and monitor the output of the DBX. So then you can actually be just tweaking the threshold dial. And you'll soon notice when you can start hearing yourself properly and not, that's where you want to kind of go to. But if you're working in post, for instance, that piece of audio I recorded, let me just switch off preview window here, switch off spectral frequency. We've got the waveform here. You can kind of eyeball the waveform and you can say, well, okay, most of the audio I want here, and you can look over here on the right, for instance, in Adobe Audition, the dBs are on the right. And you can say, well, pretty much everything I want to get through the gate is going above minus 20. I can see this is minus 18 here. It's going across here. Okay, if I set it at minus 18, that is going to get cut out. So I don't want that. But if we go to, certainly if I go to minus 24, everything's getting through. So I know I'm somewhere between minus 24 and minus 18. So you can kind of eyeball it like that. Mm-hmm. Another little tip here, other software might have this, but I know in Audition it's inside Amplitude Statistics, and you can scan your selection. So whether this be a 10-second or 11-second sample I just recorded, or whether this be a 1 hour long live stream that you've just extracted as an MP4 and pulled into your software, you can then scan the selection, and what you're going to get here is a hint. You're going to get the average RMS amplitude here, minus 26. It varies slightly left and right, but just pick one of these values. So minus 26, let's say minus 26 to minus 27. So you might want to say, okay, so my average RMS amplitude is minus 26. That's pretty much the average of where my audio is at all the way through this clip. Whether it's 11 seconds or 11 hours, it will analyze that for you.
Right.
And then I can say, right, minus 26, that's going to be my magic number for this particular live stream. Back in, pull the effect up, and we'll just say, okay, we are going to start at minus 26. We're going to have a listen to that. And Andrew, I'm just going to play back this audio. So you'll hear me talking but going through the gate. I'll start recording talking, and I'll go really quiet like this, and then I'll go really loud like this, so I'll get a nice bit. So as you can hear, minus 26 there. It's not cutting out many of the words, so it's a pretty good place to go. If I start going up to, say, let's go to minus 22 now and have a listen, I'll start recording me talking, and I'll go really quiet like this, and then I'll go really loud like that. You can just hear it starting to cut off words. Minus 18. I'll start recording me talking, and I'll go really quiet. This. And then I'll go, and then you can really, can you hear it cutting out the words there at minus 80?
Yeah. And that's obviously for this recording, your levels were so varied that this would not be the correct threshold setting for this piece of audio.
Yes.
So
So
you set the threshold, and so minus 20 is a good place to start. Attack 0.1, and then release. I mean, are the rest of the settings sort of roughly a good places to start as well?
Yeah, good places to start with attack and release. I mean, yeah, some compressors and hardware gates are a lot easier to use. Like, for instance, on the DBX, you've just got fast, slow, and there's no numbers on it. You just turn it fast and slow and figure out. So, but with this one, where I would usually go with this, I mean, I wouldn't usually go down to 0.1 because I think that's too aggressive and it's too clippy. So I'd at least give it 1 to 10 milliseconds. I think 10 milliseconds is a nice place to start. Maybe that might be too high. So let's go with 1 millisecond there, and then release. You can afford to be a little more liberal on this. 100 milliseconds, probably a little bit too liberal. Probably go for about 50 milliseconds. And the hold, I would just leave at 1 millisecond. Unless you're having problems, then just push it up a little bit and see if that makes any change to your audio.
Interesting. Okay, and then for those who are sort of doing the math, milliseconds obviously is a thousandth of a second, right? And the rough equivalent of 1 frame of video in a 30 frame per second, sort of if you're streaming in 30 frames per second, right? So it is roughly around I believe around the 30 millisecond mark. Is that correct? Somewhere around there? We did my math right.
You're overwhelming me with mathematics. I trust your calculations, Andrew.
I think it's somewhere around 33 milliseconds is about a frame or so. So yeah, so if you're in, you just imagine that if you're trying to get your audio to match up to your video streams, and that's sort of your sort of baseline, you're working with much smaller amounts of time than that.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so then release. What do you think?
So release definitely on the gate between 50 and 100 milliseconds, and again that's something that I would advise. These settings, these attack and release settings, I would pretty much advise them on a compressor. Although a compressor the next effect along throws something else into the mix, which is ratio as well. I don't know if you want me to move on and start demoing how the compressor works.
I think we should definitely move along. I see actually a couple of the viewers are actually, is this live? And we are in fact live right now. So yes. And if there's any questions you have about, this is classically referred to as a noise gate, right? So it's a noise gate, and it's just what are you letting through and what gets suppressed, right?
Exactly. Yeah, okay. A noise gate. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So then the next piece of it is once you've set the noise gate, then it's time to compress what gets through, and now it's time to make everything sort of, and this would be different from an equalizer, so this would be, I guess, compressing is taking the loudest things and compressing the waveforms, and then the expander is taking the quietest sounds and expanding them. Is that what we're about to cover? Okay.
Exactly, that's right. So yeah, so a compressor, I think it's a really, really great thing to have, particularly when you're thinking about live streaming. So for me, I found my problem as a live streamer that I needed to solve is the fact that my audio was varying too much in volume. And as you know, I do a lot of tutorials online, a lot of live streams that involve bringing in sources of audio and sometimes talking to guests, and levels can be all over the place. So often I have a co-host and she's a little bit louder than me. She talks a bit closer to the microphone, so she overpowers me like that. and then I bring in a piece of audio from the computer and it's too loud, and you know how it is. So there's a lot going on, right? And I want to make sure it's all coming out at a consistent volume. Now, I don't want to overcompress, and this is something I really want to stress for live streaming, for podcasting, for anything like that. you don't want to over compress because it's going to start sounding unnatural. Now, just to draw a comparison here, radio, they have been compressing for, it must be many, many decades.
Since the Beatles started playing on electric guitars.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So compression, it's not a new thing, but it's definitely something that we as online creators can be using in our audio toolkit. Let's talk about the reasons that radio were using compression, and they would have. So when I used to work in radio, it would always be a pleasure of mine to go into the sort of racks unit, which would usually there'd be a racks unit at the radio station itself, and then if you actually got the privilege of visiting the radio station transmitter, you would actually get to see a whole new batch of like gear and audio hardware. And I think it was the Optimod processors they used to have, FM processors they probably still do have, and these are really aggressive kind of like tube compressors that just compress everything. So the reason they're doing this for radio stations, and you'd never really listen to music through a compressor, unless you were listening to some kind of dance music, you'll want it very consistent. But it's designed for those people who are listening in the car or listening in the gym, and they want to be able to hear everything that's being outputted from the radio station. So it keeps it at that consistent volume. But often radio station compressors are set really aggressively. So if you start talking and then you go silent, the compressor goes and it just sucks up everything. So you get the background noise, the air conditioner, someone going can sound really, really loud. Breath can sound loud. So it's a problem. And
it's almost like the auto gain on your cameras, that just the microphone's constantly just raising the gain volume. And when things go quiet because it's trying to hear some real noise, and you're like, no, don't do that. Don't make it. Yeah.
Don't raise the audio. And I mean, some radio stations are different. So classical music radio stations obviously have compression set less aggressively. Otherwise, whenever you get to a quiet piece of a classical tune, it would be constantly sucking up the background noise. But certainly on pop music stations, I always remember playing the 80s pop song Calling All the Heroes by It Bites. And there's a little bit where it just goes silent for a second, and always the FM radio compressor would just go whenever that silence came in. So yeah, compression on radio, a different kettle of fish. Now, what we want to do is we want to be making sure we're leveling out audio without like pulling up all the quiet bits and stuff, because that's not the idea of a live stream. It's going to sound unnatural. So you've got threshold, you've got ratio, you've got attack, you've got release, and most importantly, you've got something called either output gain, or as I'm going to show you in a moment in Adobe Audition, it's just called makeup. It's your makeup gain. It's the last thing in the chain. And the reason for this is when you are compressing, your levels are going to go right down. So maybe I can show you this in action by just pulling up that audio I recorded a moment ago, going into the preview window here, and showing you how a compressor works. So this is my audio without any effect on, and as you can see down below the bottom half, this is the preview of the audio. If I now switch on the compressor, you will see that nothing will happen, and I'll explain why. Okay, compressor on, nothing has happened. Got a threshold of -20. This is the point in the audio that the compressor is going to kick in. So again, we can see, yeah, there's going to be some compression. So what that means is the compressor is going to look at everything, every piece of audio that goes above -20 dB, and it is going to reduce that piece of audio in amplitude by the next thing that you're going to set, which is the ratio. So if you set the ratio at 1:1, it's going to reduce it by 1, so nothing essentially. So that's why nothing's happening, because the ratio is 1:1 at the moment. Now if I make it 2 to 1, you're going to see it's going to reduce anything above -20 dB by half, by 2 to 1. So let's put that in and let's watch what happens here. And as you can see, it's now started compressing everything above -20 dB, and it's cut it in half. And again, it'll go even further. If I go 4 to 1, it will cut it to a quarter. Watch what happens below. There you go. You see, it's gone even. The bits that have gone above shrunk. Yeah. And the further you go up, you can go all the way, I think, to infinity, or, well, no, sometimes you can go to infinity, or 8, as this compressor will let you do, 8 to 1. That's pretty aggressive, though. Recommended settings, again, good place to start if you've got good loud audio is -20. And if you're working with voice, I would say anywhere between 2-1 to 4-1. 4, I would say, is aggressive. 3 is a happy medium. At the moment, I've got my compressor on my DBX set at between 2-1 and 3-1, so 2.5-1, which works for me. So let's go for 2.5 here, because again, the idea is not to be aggressive here. It's just to have a slight bit here. So as you can see now, my voice is now at a consistent volume, but of course, because the compressor has kicked in above -20 dB and pulled everything down, it's also made the audio quieter than it was before. So while we've done a good job there, we've now got quieter audio. Attack and release. To explain these again, attack is how quickly the compressor will kick in, and release is how quickly it will let go of the compression work it's just done. Really, these settings are pretty good for voice. 1 millisecond attack, 50 millisecond release, so a very quick attack when you start speaking. If you don't set the attack aggressively enough, when you say words like k or p like that, they'll really peak. As you can see, I've just turned the attack up a bit, and you can see these peaks are popping back out again. So pull that down to 1, and release is fine again at 50 milliseconds. So you've got this all working really nicely. Now it's time to turn up your makeup gain or your output gain a little bit. So up it goes, up a little bit more. And as you can see now, I'm sure you can see the difference here with this makeup gain here. You can see now this has got a lot more consistent compared to the waveform I had earlier, where obviously it was ducking down when I was talking quietly and it was peaking up when I was shouting. Now we've got a nice consistent volume level. And if this was an output piece of audio with some music mixed in, everything would just like trundle along nicely here at say an average of -6 or -9 dB. So yeah, that's pretty much the basics of setting up a compressor, which again, familiar settings. If you've already looked at noise gate, you'll find these not only in Adobe Audition but any other audio editor, and also on the front of audio hardware boxes like the DBX. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So I just want to cover the sort of the auto gate or the noise gate is really so you're cleaning the bass signal so that you're removing those unnecessary quiet room noises that occur below the level of your speaking, breaths, or just things like that. So they're not even dirtying up the audio track that's coming into the compressor. And then the compressor, at that point, you are setting that, again, around the -20 mark, just to catch all that vocal dialogue that's past that point.
Yes.
And then at this point, you're just working with the stuff that got through the gate, and hopefully it's just your dialogue and your speaking voice. And now your goal is to basically bring the loudest sounds, all of that, to actually reduce it, at the same rate, because I guess that's just knocking down, it's making everything more even. The loudest sounds are now sort of more consistently reduced, and then you add all this makeup gain to then boost the volume. I mean, I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, that's a really, really good explanation. Yeah. It's that's exactly what it's doing. And it's also important, I would say, what order you add these effects. So as you can see, this nice dynamics effect has everything in the order it should be. So you want to be noise gating before you compress, so that you've got rid of any audio you don't need in the silent bits before you start compressing. And it's the same with EQ. I mean, if you want, I can delve into EQ a little bit in a second.
I guess where I get a little confused is if you're reducing all audio above -20 dB by the same ratio. I mean, what's the difference between that and just basically I guess
just chopping it off.
Well, no, I guess it's more like you're just equally reducing all the audio. So you may be reducing the audio waveforms by a ratio or a factor, but it's applied equally. How is that in any way changing the look of the timeline or the clip or the audio waveforms when it's all reduced equally above that point?
That's a really good question. Maybe I can demonstrate that. by creating a new file. So what it's doing is it's looking at audio above that level, and then it's saying, okay, any audio that goes above that level, whatever amplitude it's at, I'm going to decrease it by the set ratio. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna create you a tone. I remember we in the last session we talked about using tones. So tones are handy things to demonstrate purposes that are at consistent volumes.
Yes.
So let me grab a tone here, just a default 440 hertz tone, and we'll make this tone at, let's make it nice and easy so we can keep the math simple, -10 amplitude, and let's see if that starts appearing. Click OK. Okay, cool. Right. Okay, so here's a tone, and
remarkably
the
consistent.
amplitude, yeah, it's a -10. There we go. Fantastic. And you can even see here on the peak meters down below, -10. Perfect. Right. Now I'm going to run a compressor. Now remember, a compressor is working in real time, and it's looking at the volume very quickly of the audio that it's getting, and it's reducing, it's cutting it. Let's stick with cutting in half so we can understand this correctly. So amplitude and compression, dynamics, and we'll go, right, compressor, let's set everything back to default, make sure we haven't got anything funny in here. And so we're going to have the threshold of -20, okay? So it's going to look at everything in that tone that goes above -20 dB. So if it's at -10 dB, we're going to go to -20. We're going to have 10 dB of audio above the threshold. Do we agree on that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we got 10 dB above the threshold. Now I'm going to go into preview window, and I'm going to turn the ratio up to 2:1. So we agree that if I type in 2:1 there, it should cut the tone above -20 in half. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we should be left, we should have a 5 dB gain reduction. Do we agree on that? Okay, so type that in. And then we'll switch on the compressor effect. I was wondering why it wasn't doing anything. Then click apply, and we should see now a tone now, instead of at -10 with that 5 dB reduction, it should be at -15. And there it is at -15. So that's a compressor in action. Now, obviously, when you're working with something dynamic like speech, the amplitude is changing all the time. So all the time the compressor is saying, right, where's this? This is at this level, okay, and this is this much above a -20. So this is like 3 dB above, so I need to reduce it by 1.5 dB. Oh, this is 1 dB above -20, so I need to reduce it by 0.5 dB. And it's constantly in real time going through, and that's how the compressor's working. Does that sort of...
Yeah, it makes sense. So the adjustments are only applied to those loudest noises, and the sort of the base upon which those sort of amplitude peaks happen are the only things that are getting affected, and it's different for each sound.
Exactly. Yeah, it's totally different for each sound. And obviously in a piece of software like Audition, it can look ahead at the wave, at what's coming next. It can be super accurate. I still find it absolute magic that boxes can exist to do this thing in real time, but they do, and they do a good job. So yeah.
Cool. Okay, so and then the makeup gain is really just because everything's getting quieter, it's time to make it louder again. But this time now everything's sort of closer together. The again we've shrunk the difference between the peaks and the valleys.
Exactly right. That's right. So yeah, so that means that when you're adding that makeup gain, let's just put some more makeup gain on that. You should be able to say, okay, I'm just going to turn this up until we can see the peak over here is getting close to 0 dB, and be pretty happy with that. And because it's been compressed, there are going to be no nasty spikes. I mean, the final thing in the chain here is the limiter, which again you'd find on something like the DBX166XS, and adding that on. So the threshold here, if I was to say, okay, I can see there are quite a few little spiky bits above -6. If I set this at -6, the limiter, as a hard limiter would do, it's just going to cut those spikes out like that. So we get a nice consistent piece of audio there. And we're saying, okay, nothing now is going above -6 dB. So if I then apply that to the audio here, and then I add on some makeup gain of 6 dB, or let's be safe and go just under, so let's go 5.9 like that. That is now going to be just below 0 dB, and it's going to be nice and loud. Probably too compressed and too loud, but it gives you a nice example of how all of these settings would work in harmony. So you've got the gate, you've got the compressor, you've got the limiter, all working in harmony there to give you a nice sound.
Okay, so so you didn't even touch the expander, because the makeup gain kind of makes up for all the sort of the quietness that's introduced by the compressor.
Yeah, and so I wouldn't really touch the expander, and so there's a reason for that. So the gate, the compressor, and the limiter, these settings here kind of match the settings on the front of the 166XS that I'm currently using. Mm-hmm. So that nicely mirrors what I was explaining there. And the expander, so what this is doing, this is actually working. I can explain this and show you how it works. This is actually working. Let me just undo this and bring the audio back. It's working as the full name for it is a downward expander, and what it's doing is it's expanding downward, so it's pushing downward whenever there is audio that goes across this threshold, the -20 that I've got set here. And if we turn the ratio up, so again 3:1, so how much do you want to push down by? Again, looking at the compression ratios, the same thing applies to pushing down audio. So whenever there's a silence now, the downward expander is going to kick in. Let me just play a bit of audio. Brilliant. I'll start recording me. Brilliant. So you can see here that the downward expander is going silent as soon as the threshold is crossed there. So again, downward expander here on this particular effect is quite similar to a noise gate in that it's letting audio through and then it's pushing audio out that is going below the threshold. So yeah, I mean, you can use this. This is probably a less aggressive version of the auto gate over here, if you set it correctly, and it can. It's almost like having a producer like fading down your audio every time there's a silence.
Right.
So if you get your thresholds and ratios correct, yeah, this can be quite handy too.
Interesting. Okay, so that's pretty interesting. So that the other way, it doesn't let the quiet sounds through in the first place. The other way actually actively suppresses them by making them even quieter.
Exactly.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, well, this is a really good tour of the basics of sort of dynamic audio, limiting, compression, and sort of, and then the noise gates, which is something that you'll find in Wirecast. You'll find it in every audio, digital audio workstation, and obviously in Audition. So, and then of course in hardware boxes, which is great that you pointed out that this is universal. These are universal tools and principles that you'll find not only on hardware devices but also inside of software. And then once you understand what each one does, you can then apply these principles in all of them. So I think you could, obviously, let me pull up Wirecast here on the desktop, but I think we got the pro version here. So if we jump over to, say, the audio mixer, and I don't know if I may need to leave the full screen here. Hold on. And jump into, pull it up here, and I'm going to grab the regular Wirecast. There we go. Need to leave full screen here as well. So if we add, any old audio source, which I could say bring this in here, and I'm going to just add the audio, which actually I lost it because I think I unplugged that source, which is my fault. But we could bring in, say, any sort of, I'll bring in a media file here, which I think I have in my movies folder. Let's see if this has audio in it. Sorry for that. I'm not quite. I want to grab a. Okay, so this will do. So we've got these media files, which should have audio associated with them. There we go. And what we're going to do is then in the actual effects, the live audio mixer, you can actually add these same types of things. So you've got the limiter, you've got the EQ and loudness dynamic. I'm not seeing compressor here, so we would call it, I guess, noise reduction. And then there's just a straight noise reducer. Would you recommend, for what you've shown so far, Mike, in either the limiter or the noise gate, is that what you'd also recommend for cleaning up or removing background noise? The same tools?
So
or do you have another set of techniques for those?
I would assume noise reduction would be reducing any hiss or background noise. One thing I would say to take a look at there is the dynamics effect. If you click that,
I just pulled that up. So that's exactly what you had on yours. So now we see again the threshold, the ratio, the output, the attack, the release, all of that.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So that's it. Yeah. Oh, wow. You got threshold, ratio, output, attack, release, limiter. Great. And you've got a gate in there as well, which threshold is fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got all the stuff we've talked about so far on the show. It's all there in that effect. So yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, so this actually would be the tool that you'd reproduce what we did, what you just showed us. And so
yeah, exactly.
In Wirecast, if you were wanting to jump in and sort of fine-tune your microphone output or your master audio output in Wirecast, what sort of, if we were to play around with this list of built-in effects in the Pro version, obviously the Dynamics is a great place to start. Are there other ones that you would maybe advise Wirecast users to pay attention to here?
Right. This is brilliant. So yeah, Dynamics is a huge one. I even noticed when you opened up the Dynamics effect, there's a limiter in there as well. Mm-hmm. So that's really good. If you switch that from off, if you move that dial down, right. Oh, that's fantastic. Right. Okay. So Dynamics, I would say this is if you want to make your audio sound better in Wirecast, this is the effect to focus on first and foremost. So again, yeah, we've been through this earlier on. So threshold, I'd start it at -20. I'd start your ratio at 2:1, just as you've got it set there. Output, that's your makeup gain, isn't it? So again, you'll need to slightly push that up just so you can hear your audio, because the compressor will reduce it. Okay. You've got attack and release, so it's 27. Gosh, that's even less than a millisecond, isn't it? 27. It's like I don't even know how to say that.
What is that unit again? I forget. Yeah.
But can you push it up? So how far does the attack go up if you pull that attack up?
1571 looks like. Pi, whatever that symbol is.
Excellent.
All the way down
Indeed,
to
I will need to
2.
research that. But yeah, I mean, usually I go for 1 millisecond. So if you can get the equivalent of that in a millisecond, then go for it. And then it must be even smaller than a millisecond, which is amazing. But I mean, it's setting this really aggressively is not a problem, because you're just asking the compressor to kick in quickly. Okay. Release again, I'd start around 50 milliseconds. Limiter. Brilliant. Yeah, don't leave that off. Definitely, like you've set it there, Andrew, I just leave it at -1 dB. And what that means is that no matter how loud you shout or scream, or your compressor lets audio through, you are not going to peak above -1 dB. So wouldn't set it any more aggressively than that. I mean, some may argue that maybe set it at -3, but I think -1 is good. Then you've got gate threshold again. Set this up, but with caution, otherwise it's going to start clipping your words. And then you've got attack and release there again.
-30 or -25 if you were very quiet, depending. But you're probably somewhere in the -30 to -20 range with this.
Yeah, but I mean, this is going to help you in real time to sound better instantly with your live streams inside Wirecast.
And then you even have the ability to do this master mix in, so the amount to which all of these effects are applied to the output.
Yeah, I'm not sure why you'd want to go any less than 100% on that, but it's there.
Maybe you don't have time to figure out exactly which a slider is messing everything up, so you just need to back everything off a little bit quickly.
Maybe you want some compression, but not quite so much.
You get out of jail free slider there. Okay, and then the gate attack, we need to figure out what that unit is, but it looks like this one goes up to 15,782 all the way down to 2 again. If you know this symbol, please chat this in the chat. Somebody has to know this out there.
Microsecond.
Microseconds. Interesting.
Just seen in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, so interesting
Micros.
stuff.
That a
The
millionth of a
other
second.
effect that it caught my eye is if you go back in and drop down the effects available.
Yeah, let me
to
just
So-
delete these real fast.
Yeah.
Which
I want to explore a few of these, but there's one that really caught my eye that I'd like to go to next. And that is the one you're highlighting, the DS.
DS.
DS. So
again, if you want to pull up you just click the gear there. Here we go.
okay, so again, right. Oh, this is super cool. Okay, so we've got like a threshold, we've got a frequency, and we've got high frequency drive. Okay, so DS is good if you have like a sibilant sound on your microphone. So if you're talking in and you're saying "s" and it's like it's just distorting and sounding horrible, or you get it with some voices more than others, and you think, oh dear, that doesn't sound too good when they say "s" and stuff like that. So what you're doing here is, again, you can set really here the one you want to focus on, the threshold. Obviously the more you pull the threshold down, so -30, -40, -50, the more you drag that over that way, the more aggressive the de-esser will be. My advice would be leave it at the default there, which was -30. If you go down too far, it's going to end up making the person who's speaking sound like they have a bit of a cold. And then with the frequency, you want to just drag that around until you find the frequency where you're getting that aggressive, distorted treble sound. So it can vary from voice to voice. I can actually show you a visual way to decipher.
Sure.
Let me see if I hop onto my screen here for a second. I'll start.
Bring you back up here just a second. There we go.
Great. So I've just found that's an S that I said there, and I'm playing that now. And if I look in spectral frequency, so to determine the frequency you might want to set in Wirecast, you can use something like Audition and have a look here at the spectral frequency display, which you access just up here. Just click that button there, and we have got a heat map essentially of frequencies. So remember, you're setting frequencies over in Wirecast, and we are looking at a frequency over here between 4K and 10K. So if we go in the middle of that, we're looking at.
By the way? Where are you looking at the 4K? 10K?
So this is over to the right-hand side. We're seeing hertz, frequency in hertz, and we're seing that big yellow blotch here on the S between 4K and 10K.
Can you hover your mouse again so we can see?
Oh yeah, so this is. Oh, let's do it. Yeah, here we go. This is the bit that we're looking at here, but we're also looking over here at the numbers in hertz of the frequencies. So we're looking at 4K, we're looking at 10K, and we're looking at 6K is kind of in the middle of that yellow zone.
Okay.
So I'm saying for my voice in particular, my sibilant zone, if there was one, would be around, let's start at 6,000 hertz.
6K.
Then you can go back over to Wirecast and you can say, right, okay, I'm going to plug in 6,000 hertz to that de-esser, and that's going to make me sound super cool and super good. If you really want to figure out the frequency, and this DS is working in real time, what you can do is you can pull the threshold right the way down to the bottom to, I think it went down to -60 dB, and then you can speak into your microphone as you're moving the frequency around. And the way I often advise to test a de-esser is just go sss like that into your microphone, and with the threshold set at the most aggressive setting, move the frequency around your kind of central sibilant zone until you hear like a nice reduction, and you're like, oh yeah, that sounds better. And trust your ears on this. Just listen and think, yeah, that's sounding better. And then once you've found that frequency, and it's different for every voice, then you want to move your threshold up. So it's just about perceptible. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
Perceptible. So it sounded funny. But and to show you, sorry, Andrew, I'm going to make you go back to my screen again.
Not a problem.
But to show you this in action, I'm going to go into the de-esser on Adobe Audition, and I'm going to set it up at my sibilant range. And I'm going to show you how a de-esser should work if it's all working well. So again, you see the same settings as you've got in Wirecast. You've got your threshold here, and you've got basically your center frequency here. So I'm going to go for, let's do the same as you had there. Let's have -30 dB. Let's put my center frequency as 6,000 to be nice and simple to start with. And let's have a listen. I'll start recording me talking, and I'll go really quiet like this, and then I'll go really loud like this, so I'll get a nice bit of... Okay, you can see that gain reduction is tickling in quite a bit, even when there are non-SE sounds. So obviously I've got my threshold set too aggressively. Now, I see in Wirecast you don't have a gain reduction monitor at present, so you can't see that. But what you can do is you can record a little bit of test audio, for instance, in Audition, and then find the threshold that you would need to set yourself at. So this can help you. So really loud like this. Really loud like this. So you see the gain reduction is happening even on words that aren't sibilant. That is the example of a badly set threshold. So pull this up to -21. Really loud like this. Okay, did you see now that gain reduction only popped in when I got the S? Really loud like this. When you get the S, the gain reduction is in.
Yeah.
Move it down a little bit more. -24. Really loud like this. Oh, no, it's starting to kick in on words that aren't sibilant, so move it up. Really loud like this. Okay, that's a sweet spot. -22.5. It's now kicking back my S's, but it's not affecting the rest of my audio, because the last thing you want to do is de-ess audio that is not sibilant or not notoriously sibilant. And as you can see from my spectral frequency, if I just marquee select around here, you'll see over here, you see there's nothing really aggressive there that I want to be reducing with a de-esser. But when we get to S, you can see there's the big yellow frequency that can sometimes be perceived as aggressive. So we then go back to Wirecast and we say, okay, my threshold is -22 or -22.5, and my center frequency is 6,000, and I'm good to go.
Cool. That is a great way to sort of narrow it in. And then what's the high frequency drive?
So the high frequency drive, I'm not really sure. -20 dB. It's not something that I don't have it on the de-esser over here on Audition.
It goes up to 20 and down to -20. So yeah, it's a bit of a mystery.
Yeah,
there. Might be in the user
it
guide.
could be. Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. I mean, the user guide probably explain it, and it would probably be something that's really, it's probably an extra thing, I'm guessing, but perhaps it's looking at the high frequencies above the frequency you're centered in. So frequencies that go above 6,000 hertz, or maybe frequencies that go above 10,000 hertz. And it's like, how much do you want to drive on these frequencies too and pull them out? But I'm really guessing there. So it's not something that I've been familiar with in the de-essing I've done. So yeah,
Okay. Well,
read
fair
the
enough.
guide.
You don't need to know everything, Mike. It's okay.
No.
We'll give you a
You're
pass
hovering
on
over
one question.
Thank you. You're hovering over multiband. I'm curious about this one.
Okay.
Open up multiband.
All right,
have a
let's
look at
open up multiband and check that one out. So here we go.
So what is this? Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got... Right, yeah, so it's a multiband compressor. Multiband compressors use with caution. What they will do is they will compress different parts of your audio. So they will compress the low frequencies different to the mid frequencies, different to the high frequencies. So if you were to really... Where this would work really well is if you had a sibilance problem that really you couldn't iron out. If you put some harsh high frequency compression on the H, so the H comp, if you add that in, you will find that it will compress the high frequencies. So you might find that's good for just pulling out some of the higher range. But again, I can't see which high frequencies it would be working on.
Right.
Oh no, sorry. There is at the top. There's L to M and M to H. So we can see here the frequencies that it would be kind of looking at. So yeah, the way you've said it there, low frequencies would be anything below 205 hertz, and mid frequencies, the way you've currently said it, would be anywhere between 205 and 2114, and then high frequencies anything above 2114. So you're essentially compressing each different band of frequencies, low, mid, and high, separately. And often applying too much multiband compression is often something that people accuse for giving them headaches, because it just sounds too compressed or too too radio-like. So yeah,
Right.
use it with caution.
Right.
But it's nice to have there, and it can give you a big sort of broadcasty sound if you set it up well.
Oh, interesting. And it
but
looks
yeah.
like you can even choose what you're listening to, maybe on the
Oh, cool.
so you can actually sort of isolate this what it sounds like on each frequency set or range.
And you've even got, I see at the bottom there, second from bottom, you've got stereo width. So it's working on how wide your audio is. So I'm guessing really, rather than trying to use this on the voice, which might be sort of voice suicide, this might work better if you have like a piece of music, or if you're playing music clips. So you have like one channel on your Wirecast that you're playing your intro and outro on and stuff like that. You might want to multiband compress that a bit. And also if you push up the width there, if you've got a nice stereo intro with, say, like a track like the Beatles, for instance, where they're, Here Comes the Sun, and the vocals are over on the right and the instruments are generally over on the left, and there's other stuff going on in the middle. If you move the width up to 200%, it's going to kind of like really push that out wide. So if you thought the Beatles were just a few feet away from you, now they're going to be a few meters away from you.
Got
stuff
it.
like that.
Interesting. Huh.
Cool
yeah,
feature
so
to have
could
a
be
mess
something
with.
it could be something to play around with, particularly on music coming, or music tracks. That's a great piece of advice. All right, and then we should probably maybe pick one last one and then wrap up for today. If there's anything else that you wanted to comment on, noise reduction perhaps might be a good one. I'm sure a lot of people would look at that one and assume they could just throw it in and use it to reduce stuff, but I'm sure that there's caution that needs to be used here.
Yeah, definitely. So noise reduction I seem to remember that's a percentage slider. Yeah. So that's, I'm guessing that's using some kind of machine learning or some kind of clever algorithm to say, okay, this looks like dialogue and this looks like hiss or fan or background noise, and it's pulling it out. So it's a kind of, one slider like fixes all your problems kind of thing. So
well, if it's anything like ScreenFlow, I'm usually down in the 20 to 30% with my noise reduction.
Yeah. 20 to 30 is definitely sort of light. 40% is mid. 60% is aggressive. Anything above that, and you're going to sound like a wishy-washy underwater kind of fish tank effect. So, use with caution. But it's nice that you just have the one slider, because so many noise reduction effects and plugins that I've played with, they have about 20 different dials and frequencies to select, and all the rest of it. So it's nice that you have that simplicity there.
And even
but again,
increments of 5, that's all you get. You can't even dial it in more than that.
Cool. So yeah, like you were saying, Andrew, I wouldn't go anywhere above sort of 20 or 30% and see how that works for you. But in all honesty, if the audio that you are putting into Wirecast for your live stream is good, I wouldn't touch this at all, because all it's going to do, even at the lowest setting, it's going to ever so slightly reduce your quality. It has to, because it's pulling out frequencies, and it's not going to, completely catch all the noise and not touch your voice. So if you've got a good mic going in, you don't need noise reduction, that's cool. But maybe this will be good, this kind of thing, if you've got a Skype call coming in on one channel, and we know that Skype can often like have a little bit of hiss on the line or stuff like that, then you might want to just put a bit of noise reduction in and put it at 20 or 30% on the Skype channel, and then your viewers or listeners will be probably thank you for it. So,
that's a great piece of advice. And further, if you want to get the place that you do the best noise reduction, obviously, is you make your studio quiet first, then you kind of go back to the dynamics and talk a little bit about the noise gate. And if you set that right, then you really shouldn't have the need for a lot of background noise reduction. And turn off the air conditioner and the refrigerator.
Indeed.
Well, Mike, this was another really great deep dive. I know that these types of things tend to get technical, but that's because they are technical, and it takes a little bit of time to explain them and how they work. But if you take the time, and we've done this in a little over an hour, I think this is a really good tutorial on the principles behind dynamics and dynamic adjustment to your audio signals, compression, limiting, gates, attacks and threshold settings. And then also we were able to look in the Wirecast Pro and look at some of the audio effects filters that are in there now, and actually got your thoughts on how you might set those, which was wonderful. It was a huge bonus for me. So thank you so much for your time. I know you've stayed up very late to do this for us. So
that's my pleasure.
It was great. It was really, really wonderful. So
I really enjoy it, Andrew. It's great to be on, and I always love that when I'm on with you, I deep dive and you kind of extract all this information. So it's fun.
Well, I appreciate you being game to do that, and I actually want to throw up your contact card where people can get more information, watch your videos, and get more of this great tutorial and teaching. You're a natural teacher, Mike.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, I'd love to stay in touch. So wherever you are, if I could direct to one place right now, it'd be youtube.com/musicradiocreative. And please push me over 100K. I'm nearly there. I'm a few hundred away. So you may be responsible for getting me my play button.
Yes. All right. Well, do it. Go subscribe to his channel. There's a wonderful set of things. And Mike, we'd love to see more. If you do, maybe we can set you up with a Wirecast Pro if you don't have one, and you can play a little bit around with some of these settings and offer some best practices. Because obviously, I really am not qualified to teach the effects on these things, because I'm not coming from an audio background. So I really appreciate having someone with your expert eye coming in and looking at these tools and kind of offering some best practices and advice with these settings inside Wirecast and how you might do that. So if you produce some videos, please send them our way, and we'll definitely post them and share them with our viewers and our users.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'd like to do that.
Okay. Well, the time has flown by. We're definitely well over our normal sort of soft limit of an hour here. So I think I'm going to say goodbye and thank you again, Mike. And welcome back. This was a great show.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
All right. Well, get some sleep. Thanks for staying up late. We'll see you next time, and really appreciate it.
Cheers.
Okay, folks, that was Mike Russell. If you want, go check him out at Music Radio Creative. Brilliant guy, so nice and so knowledgeable, and I really do want to encourage him to maybe shoot some videos or some more tutorials. He really was just looking at some of these effects on the fly and offering advice, but I think if he has a little time to play around with them, he may even pull out more and see how they work a little bit, and maybe offer some tips to improve. I see in the chat here some people are recommending VST plugins. That is definitely on the list and on the roadmap, so I hope to get those as well, but I don't have a date or a time frame on that. We'll just have to see when we can get those in. And for the rest of you, I hope this was a quick, not quick, but at least a really valuable overview of noise gates, limiters, compression, and how you can use dynamic adjustment to really improve the sound of your audio, reduce background noise, and generally bring up the overall quality. And then, as you saw, some tools in there inside Wirecast you can use that already have these settings available. So I'll be playing with those. I'm sure Deborah Leewell and I will be playing with those on the show ourselves. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for staying with us. If you stayed for the whole thing, if you're watching this on demand, skip around, pick the parts that you find useful or interesting, and skip the rest. And we will see you next week, hopefully again for another Wirecast Live show. Maybe not quite so technical or in depth, but still fascinating and interesting with Mr. Jeffrey Fitzgerald. We'll be talking all about sports production, and live production of sports talk shows. And thanks to you guys, our viewers, for watching every week and offering suggestions and leaving comments in the chat. And also thanks to our partners who make this show possible with all the technology that they bring to our studio. And we will see you again next week, Thursday, same time here, 2:30 p.m. Pacific time, for another episode of Wirecast Live. This has been real, and thank you. We'll see you next time.